It looks like the kidneys from the BMW 4 Series Coupe concept is actually going into production. I know it seems like a lot of people don't really like it. I can see how controversial it is because it's not something that we're used to seeing, but I wish people understood that this is coming full circle when it comes to BMW's design language, and it's kind of a risky move. The same kind of move that Chris Bangle did in the early 2000s with the E65 7 Series, which turned out to sell more than any previous 7 Series in the BMW's history. Now I wonder, what would happen if BMW decided to introduce these kidneys from the 30s earlier? So let's say during the Chris Bangle era, instead of the Chris Bangle era, they would bring back the kidneys from the 30s in the early 2000s. So let's say we have a BMW E46, the cleanest looking 3 Series ever produced by BMW. What would happen if we apply the kidneys to this M3? I have to find out. Now, I've made a video on the 7 Series a long time ago, similar to this one, but that was more of a joke video. All I did was extend the grille to a ridiculous size and not really bother about the overall design language of the car. In this video though, I really want to explore what the E46 could look like with a grille inspired by the 30s BMWs. These grills that we see coming now to most BMW models aren't anything new. The design is in fact so old that we've probably forgotten they existed in the first place. BMW had models such as the 1936 BMW 328, the 327 Coupe from 38, the 1940 BMW 335, the 55 502, and even in the 60s with the 1960 BMW 3200. These all had this vertical grille shape. A little rounder, of course, suitable for the time era, but overall proportions of the grille is very similar to the recent concepts from BMW. It wasn't until the 1970s and the BMW 2002 when this started to change. That's when we noticed the grille getting smaller and transform into a wider design over the next 2 decades, with the 1995 BMW 5 Series all the way up to today's models. It feels like BMW reached a point where they can't take the grille any wider graphically, so they decided to try something new, although as we now know, this isn't really anything new. Personally, I like the fact that they are experimenting with the design and take big risks like this. The bigger the risk, the bigger the reward. As mentioned before, BMW has gone through phases like this before. The most recent one was the Bangle era. People absolutely butchered the E65 7 Series when it was presented, but as we now know, it outsold any previous 7 Series and forced other car companies to catch up, stop being so comfortable with their design and start innovating. Now there's been a lot of renders of the 4 Series concept without the massive grille. It's been photoshopped to a more traditional BMW grille. I look at these renders and I wouldn't have given it a second thought if that's what it actually looked like. It would feel like I've seen the same face 50,000 times. Is it pretty? Yes. Is it new and exciting? Absolutely not. This is a huge leap in BMW's design, and it's not like they chose to introduce this design feature in a few subtle steps, stretching over 2 and 3 models. And that's why I like the 4 Series concept even more. It's like, bam, here you go, this is how we're going to design our cars from now on, and you're going to love it. So what happens when we apply this to the E46? Well, it definitely gets interesting. It's not an easy adjustment because in our minds we've seen the E46 so many times that when we drastically change the proportions of the graphics like we do here, the brain kind of starts to resist. It will scream at you that there is something wrong here, and the brain starts to try make sense of it all. But looking at it objectively, I think it's a very interesting idea. We can't copy-paste the grille, however, from the 4 Series because they are from 2 completely different time eras and design languages. We need to fit the grille and graphics, the curves and lines, into the rest of the body of the E46. This redesign is not to make the E46 prettier. The E46 is my favorite 3 Series of all time, and I think it is one of the best proportioned cars ever made. This redesign is to see what could have happened in a parallel universe where the timeline and car design is behind by 20 years, but the graphics are current. It's like putting all of BMW's design features throughout time in a blender and see what comes out. I look at the new BMW 4 Series Concept Coupe as a piece of art. If you think of art, if you think of let's say a Picasso painting, the thing with art is that it's not perfect. So let's take another example here. I really appreciate the skill level of people who can draw photorealistic drawings of people or cars or whatever, but when I look at something like that, it doesn't get me excited because it looks exactly like a photo. It doesn't have any artsiness to it. I would rather look at something more dirty and something imperfect, because that gets my mind going, and that's actually what gets me excited when I look at the piece of art, and that is the art itself in the piece, if that makes sense. So with the 4 Series here, it's not the prettiest 4 Series ever. As I said before, if you chop the grille up, if you make it smaller, it is going to be more easy on the eye or easy on the mind, because that's what we're used to seeing in a BMW. We're not used to seeing this massive grille in the front. So this is an imperfection that over time is going to become the norm for our minds, and when it does, I think we're going to realize that it actually looks pretty good. With that said, there are a few more details I want to explore in this redesign. The issue that I had was, should I change the headlights of the E46 to make it to change it in any way? But the thing is, when I did that, I felt like I was changing them just for the sake of doing something that's not new, but it wasn't fitting with the overall design language of the rest of the car, such as the grille and the lines that we're doing here on the side. So I decided to keep those, and that will also make sure that we know that this is an E46, just a different version of it. There we have it. That's the redesign of the E46, or the retro design, I guess you would call it, since we added a grille from the 30s. Looking at it now, I think it looks very interesting. I actually like how this turned out, even though it looks weird, and that's just because we're so used to seeing E46 over the past 20 years that when we make a drastic change like this, it's not going to make sense. But I think it's interesting to take all the features from BMW and just blend them together, take one part from the 30s, maybe something from modern generations, and just mix them in the middle and see what comes out. And that's pretty much what BMW is doing now with the 4 Series concept. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit that like button and subscribe if you are new. I will see you in the next one. Take care.